You're listening to This Week in America with Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Thank you for joining us on the program. A new series of books from the talented Stan Matthews. Mark Christopher, the tale of one man's faithful journey through poverty, war, tragedy, and opposition as he searches for his destiny and meaning in life. The Rise of Gideon shares the tale of a public relations guru and an ambitious New York reporter as they work together to expose a vicious society of extremists. And The Last County Fair, a compelling story of an investigative reporter on a quest to uncover the truth about the demise of a county fair who finds love while uncovering a conspiracy led by greed and deception. Stan Matthews is an accomplished author, editor, journalist, film writer, producer, public relations expert, and fundraiser, as well as a retired pastor. Stan has worked as an investigative reporter for news outlets in both the United States and Canada, as a fundraiser for many institutions, including churches, colleges, hospitals, the American Cancer Society, Easter Seals, and PBS, an extensive traveler, now living in Florida, a distinguished and prolific author. We welcome Stan Matthews to This Week in America. Stan, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Vic. Great to be here.
I love this series of books, Mark Christopher, The Rise of Gideon, The Last County Fair. And I want to talk about your extensive background, especially in reporting, and we'll do that in a few minutes. But let's talk about the ideas for the books. I read a little synopsis of each one, and the books are as interesting as I just read the synopsis. Where do all these ideas come from books? Let's talk about Mark Christopher in particular. Where did that idea come from?
From personal experience, and I believe that ministry is more than preaching. You've got to be able to know your people. You're going to help them in any way. You've got to know them, their children, their families, their background, and you spend time with them. Preaching is okay. You bring the Bible, and if they have any questions, you might bring some answers to them, but mainly you're going to find out where you can be of help and service.
And the background on that, explain who Mark Christopher is. This goes back to around the Great Depression. I mentioned in the beginning, poverty, war, tragedy, very difficult life growing up. Give me a little background on Mark.
I take some events, perhaps, from my own experience, but it has to be out of my own experience. I believe that fiction should be experiential, that if you can't find it in your own experience, then go out and find it. And find the backgrounds that where people live in, what they're influenced by, and what the current source would be. In this way, it's a lifetime experience for Mark Christopher, from the time he was born until he gets into trouble by being a friend to the unfriended, which was not the way he was trained in seminar, but he went to it on his own accord and broke a lot of rules, too, for what a preacher and minister is supposed to be. That's my own personal experience and my own way of doing ministry.
Yeah, and he's got a relationship with an Indian. Explain that, because it became a very close friendship and really sort of molded the rest of his life.
Yes, well, all my three novels that you cited there are love stories as well. And this is, you have to love what you're doing. And if you can't find it and you're opposed to it, then you're going to have a lot of trouble. And you're going to get on with your own personal belief and experience. And if you haven't experienced, you just go out and find some way to do the experience to be helpful. And Mark Christopher gets in trouble with that because he wants to serve people.
Our guest on This Week in America is author Stan Matthews. He's got 3 new books. We're talking about the series: Mark Christopher, The Rise of Gideon, The Last County Fair. The books are available all across the country. Information at Stan's website, which is fictionbystanmatthews.com. Very simple to get to by just going to our website. You can link on directly to Stan's website and get information on the book. And talking about the ministry and how he goes about doing it, there really is sort of standing up to the establishment, isn't there? There's sort of this defiance, and he's at odds with what they want him to do.
Well, times are changing. All 3 are novels set in the 60s. We start off in the 60s with the assassination of the president and his brother, Martin Luther King, and the war. The country was at war. And so these were vital times for ministers, for students, for entire populations, which challenged the perhaps even the faith in which they were raised. And it was in universities especially that this was felt. They were establishing a counter-revolution, and some of them died for it on campus. But nevertheless, that is the key, I would say, the people who lived through the 60s and that, then they had to change, and they had to fight back, and they had to live through it. And that's not political at all. It's just who we are. And this deals, the background of all three novels is the history that evolved from 1960 to 1969.
Yes, as you're reading the books, you sense that, and it's interesting. What kind of influence did that have on you? As I listen to you and as I read, it really influenced your life. It changed your outlook on life. It gave you a different perspective, didn't it?
My perspective was changed. It grew more serious as the time went by. And I said, what is going on in the country that this is happening? And it were social issues in the main, a little bit political, but why are we at war and what it's changing for? An indiscriminate number of people who were called up in the draft, including my own son. This is why it brought me to it. And so I lived through it. And I felt it as for instance, as when I was on the staff and the faculty of George Williams College in Chicago, and a lot of these events occurred. So I went back to, and I always wrote from my journalistic way of reporting, who, what, when, where, and why. I investigated these things from their source, who was doing it, who was receiving and being hurt by it, and I applied these to the fiction. So the source of history is realistic, but my own experiences in each of these cases and the places where I have lived and ministered to people or was with people or even family life, I adopted from life as we live it, how people are experiencing it, not just me, but what I know about how they were injured in a way and had to get through it and rise through it. So they are dramatic in all that respect.
Yes, and as I sat to read the books, Mark Christopher, The Rise of Gideon, The Last County Fair by Stan Matthews, our guest in the program. His website is fictionbystanmatthews.com. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can link on directly. Books are available all across the country. After having talked with you and understanding your background in journalism, specifically investigative reporting, I'm thinking, how much different is that to sit then and write a novel? But as I'm reading that, you're basically doing those journalistic skills, and I think you just touched on that, kick into an extent. You're basically telling a story, aren't you?
That's right. And as a Canadian, I brought Canadian aspects to much of it too, although they're all based in USA. So there are differences there in that respect. Another difference, I always used a typewriter. Now, of course, in journalism, and now that I'm out of it, all the reporters use a computer.
Yes. Things have changed. We talked before about, I mentioned the fact that you're a film producer and a film writer, and that goes back to the days with 16 millimeter, and you had to get the film out and put it through the right sprocket so that you were able to show the film. Things have changed dramatically. The first book we talked about was Mark Christopher. Then The Rise of Gideon. This introduces a journalism student in the early 1960s, Art James. And I mentioned the fact that an ambitious New York reporter gets involved with a public relations expert. Talk a little bit about the backstory on that, because we've got a little bit of you got a communist cell going on there. This really is an intriguing story. It's one of those where you start reading it, you don't want to put the book down. You want to go on to the next chapter and see what's going to happen. Tell me about Art James and his mission.
Well, I was ambitious myself and got that bylines at the Montreal Star, for instance, where I had a column for 4 years called The Church Today. And I like to see as everybody reporter did, like to see the name in print. I complained because my name was in small print, 6 point instead of 12 or 14. I got it. And I was looked out for feature articles on social events and people who are taking care of people socially. I went out of my way and beyond that to education, to schools, to colleges, my university, McGill University, and I looked them up to see what they're doing. And so I became known as the feature writer of those who are social, whether it's an urban event or a hospital or a mission, or whatever. And I had photographs taken by the staff of photographers too. So I got into that way. And there are so many things that in that my experience that contributed to my social concerns. And I wanted to bring that all together and show the difference it makes when you look into it in the man himself who searches out these things. Why are these things happening? And the reason is because the changes were not only political, but in the social concerns. And war brought along a lot more social concerns in that respect. And there were economic changes were going on. And through every phase of how the world turns, we experience it, and we have difficulty just be used to it, whether it's economic or political or just in the way we are. We're suburban, then we can't are urban or outside the suburban areas, and we're raising cows and so forth, and all of a sudden we're not, the old system of agriculture is disappearing, and we're just can't stand it. As good old rural life is,
yes,
has been. So there are all these things that are what young people, especially in university, have to go through at the time, even as they're studying 4 years or 5. Things change even as they are growing up in a way, intellectually.
The book that we're talking about specifically right now is The Rise of Gideon. It's part of a new series, Mark Christopher, The Rise of Gideon, The Last County Fair by Stan Matthews, our guest on the program. The website is fictionbystanmatthews.com. The book is available all across the country, and of course you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. The Rise of Gideon deals with communism. It deals with a little-known organization. The writer, the student, the journalism student, Art James, who's the reporter, is able to go and to expose. The last book in the series, The Last County Fair, is set like in 1967. This is interesting because it starts off and you're thinking this is just a normal story. It can't have a whole lot of implications. They're going to shut down the county fair. Art James, once again, is involved in this. He does a little bit of working behind the scenes, and he really uncovers a major story, doesn't he?
He does, and Mark Christopher appears once more in the county fair, because when he was ministering to migrants in the first book, Mark Christopher, he also is asked to preach at a camp which is totally manned by black people from the South, and he does. Then he finds out what the seriousness these people are up against. They're not integrated at all in the areas where he happens to be ministering. So he goes there and he works for them, and he faces great opposition. He appears again, and after he takes the migrants to the county fair, which was segregated, and he brings his people in there, and as he's punished by being beaten, and as he brings the people in by the police and sheriffs, and ends up in jail. So it is a series in that respect that we have these two characters, Mark James and Mark Christopher himself, appearing elsewhere, and we account for the passage of time to how things change.
Stan Matthews, the author, our guest on This Week in America. The book is that we're talking about now, The Last County Fair. FictionByStanMatthews.com is the website. Talk about what you would like the readers to take away from this. It is all of them are fascinating stories, love interest in those. They deal with all types of issues. When the book is over and we put it down and we've enjoyed the book, are there messages that you'd like to have resonate with the reader?
I would like you, the reader, to have an understanding, perhaps for the first time, of what these changes and social changes go by in the periods of time, year by year, year by year. And we cope with the changes as we continue living with them. There has been so many experiences of people being cross because the good old days they think are changing. Change is inevitable. We go through physical changes, mental changes, and changes to our spirit, too, along with it. Some caused by extreme changes that go on suddenly, like a war, like World War II did. And I experienced that. These things need to be taken into consideration in order for any person to live a life that is happy, contented with change, and knows how to do it. At the same time, it requires love. And we do have love stories in these books, all three.
Exactly, yes.
Actually. And so if you're sharing a life as you do with your wife, your family, your parents, and so forth, then you have to embrace them as their life is changing too. So you need an understanding of it. But the romances are real. They are necessary. And the change is going on. Marriage has to be there, with some people, or else other things are changing now rapidly here in 2017. So you can read that books and you can find out ways to cope, which is a necessity of living a life that is you enjoy and makes a difference with others whom you love.
I think as you're reading the books, and you've got Mark Christopher and Art James, what makes them so stand out and enjoyable to read is they are not one-dimensional. These are like real people. We've got a couple minutes left in the program, and I mentioned that you've got so many books that you've written, so many projects that you're working on. It's not fair to only give you a couple minutes to tell me what you're working on, but what are some of the things some of the projects you're working on now? Because I know you've got a multitude of projects going on.
The current events in politics and so forth lead me to consider where I've been. I'm an immigrant. I went with friends and so forth, they say, talk about the immigration. And I say, I'm an immigrant. Where are you from? Canada. Oh, that's different. I said, no, it is the same, because it meant a great deal of change. On the 24th of May, we always sang, give us a 24th of May is the Queen's Victoria, the Queen Victoria's birthday. If they don't give us a holiday, we'll all run away. So, and we were British, you see. We were British first, Canadian next. We were able to go to England as a Canadian and be welcomed as a fellow Canadian. And subsequently, I went through the 5 years of living in the States and becoming a citizen. So I am a Canadian American. And this means that I am just as much of an immigrant as anybody from any country in the world.
What do you think when you look now and you see making it very difficult for people, especially from some countries, to come to this country and denying them the possibility of a life like you had? What do you think when you're reading and watching that unfold?
What does it make me think of?
Yeah, when you're looking at that, what are your thoughts? Do you see a rationale, or do you think that this is just it's too restrictive?
No, I won't. It sounds like a lot of different jobs, and it's true. And I was not responsible. I was called to do this. People came to me to do it. I was with the World Council of Churches, helping them in the second World Convention they held. And I worked a lot with the National Council of Churches with different denominations, and found that in public relations, inevitably you're going to be raising money too. So I was sort of called into it for the need that was there. And I was just called by these different organizations so I would help them out. And I did, as a professional, on and off too. But meanwhile, I was preaching since I was 17, and I never stopped because before I retired, I was 8 years in my very own pastor in New Jersey. And so I retired for that, but I'm still doing things, preaching every once in a while wherever I am.
Well, you're still getting the message out, even when you're writing the books and doing the films and that type of thing. You're still reaching out and impacting in a very positive way on people. Stan Matthews has been our guest on This Week in America. The books we're talking about, the new series is, you've got Mark Christopher, The Rise of Gideon, The Last County Fair. They are all very enjoyable reads. Information available at Stan's website, which is very simple, fictionbystanmatthews.com. The books are available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places, and you can go directly to Stan's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and linking on to all the information at fictionbystanmatthews.com. Stan Matthews, our guest on the program. Stan, it was a pleasure having you on the program. Hopefully we can do this again. Excellent books, all of them. Mark Christopher, The Rise of Gideon, The Last County Fair. Thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you, Vic. I've enjoyed it very much.
It was our pleasure, sir. Thank you for being with us. Once again, our guest on the program, Stan Matthews. Information on his books available at fictionbystanmatthews.com. And of course, you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Stay tuned. We're back after these messages.